I was totally convinced that there was a real need to have like one of these big epic science fiction stories.
Stargate takes mythology on Earth and puts a clever spin on it.
As time has gone on, the love of that film has really grown.
Stargate is definitely one of my favorite films of all times.
Why did they bring you?
I'm here in case you succeed.
Instead of going into the future, Stargate was the first film that kind of told us about our past. How did we get here?
And it was really the only time ancient Egyptian has been even a kind of active spoken language for several thousand years.
This was an opportunity that presents itself once in a lifetime.
And for me, it was a film that completely and utterly changed my fate.
This is really the big turn for me in my career. That's what changed everything.
It was like this fairy tale came true.
What is that?
It's your Stargate.
I had the first idea for Stargate in film school. That was like 1980 or so. But I never could do that movie because it was just too big.
He had told me about this project that he wanted to do since college that he called Necropole. And it had to do with a spaceship buried underneath the Great Pyramid.
I had not cracked, one element of it, and together with Dean, I cracked it.
I said, well, I've always wanted to do a movie that I call Lawrence of Arabia in Outer Space, about these two guys who are fighting each other. They fly through a wormhole and they land on this other planet. So we sat down and we spec'd out this script.
Want to prove that your theories are right? This is your chance.
Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody. And the reason was, they all said science fiction doesn't work.
Every single studio we went to said, science fiction's dead. It was a chance meeting with a man named Mark Friedman that got the movie financed. He had an offshoot of Le Studio Canal Plus, and he said, we'd love to make the movie, but we have a cap. We can't make any movies that cost more than $25 million. And I said, that's an amazing coincidence, because our movie cost exactly $25 million to make. And so he agreed to make the picture. Obviously, as we got into it, it was going to cost a lot more, and so finally at one point he said, all right, what's the real budget? And we said, it's going to be more like $51, $52 million. And he said, all right, let's try and figure out a way to do it.
And action!
We made this movie, without any American distributor. And it was quite expensive. So I was scared.
You understand this complicates things.
That's why I wanted you, Jack.
We went after Kurt Russell, who turned us down several times. Kurt Russell is a hero. He gave us so many lessons, and we learned so much from working with him. We were sitting on the set one day, and he says, we never get to have the experience of watching our work. And I go, what do you mean? We go to the movies, we can see our work. He goes, no. When we see our work, we have too many associated memories. So he said, if we don't get to have the experience of watching our work, then the only experience we get to have is making our work. And if that's not a good experience, what are we doing with our lives? And it was so profound, and it affected me, and it changed how I went about working in this industry from that moment on. And I really credit him for inspiring that thought.
All right, Jackson. You're on.
Me?
You're the linguist. Try to talk to him.
Then we said, who can be the young, intelligent professor? And we had a casting list. We said, James Spader, he would be really, really good at that. And if he wanted to do it, so we got the part. And he was interesting to work with him, but quite challenging for me.
James asks a lot of questions. He's a very inquisitive actor and an intellectual type of an actor.
I'm Daniel.
Shorty.
He would ask these deeper, probing questions about exactly what was behind things, and often pick out exactly the areas where there were ambiguities or there were unresolved issues without having to be prompted at all.
He wanted to know everything, and I'm saying, I don't know that, James. Ask somebody else.
I think on some level, he was embarrassed to be in a science fiction. And that embarrassment fueled him to be really tough on every scene, because he really wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to be embarrassed to be in this film.
No, it's me. I want to thank you. I'm very happy
Thank you.
When I got the script, there was essentially, if I remember right, one, maybe two scripted lines. But once I met Roland and Dean Devlin, there were these two young filmmakers who just wanted to have fun. And when I say that, I don't mean just go off on a laugh riot. I mean, they wanted to actually explore the depths of what was on the page. And that was something that I couldn't turn down.
Our executive producer, Mara Kassar, really wanted us to cast Jay Davidson in the movie because Jay had just been nominated for an Oscar for The Crying Game. And although we thought it was an odd choice, we thought there was something interesting about that, so we cast Jay Davidson as the villain.
I have to say, you know, the casting, you know, it's the first time I used April Webster as a casting director. We wanted to find somebody like for horrors, for Anubis, and they couldn't find like the right people. She said like, let's do an open casting call. Through that, you know, open casting call, we found a Jaime Honsu, who now is like kind of one of the top actors in the world. We had the hardest time finding, you know, the female lead, and we were already shooting. I was like totally in dismay.
I just arrived from Israel because I came to study acting in New York, and like all actors or wannabe actors, you have to get a job at a restaurant as a waitress.
And I remember being in Roland's trailer saying, Roland, you know, she starts shooting on Monday and it's Thursday. And he goes, we don't have her yet, we don't have her yet. And then this tape came in and it was Mili and she was perfect. And he went, that's her, cast her.
I get a frantic call. The message was, call Myrna Jacoby back ASAP. I called her up and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm calling so late. And she stopped me right away and she said, stop. You just got a female lead in a $60 million movie opposite Kurt Russell and James Spader. You're leaving tomorrow to Arizona to shoot the movie.
She came to set, kind of flustered, not knowing what's going on. She saw me and she thought I was the producer's assistant. And so she said, could you take me to the producer, please? I said, yeah. You just met him.
It was one of these magic things, you know, in the last moment, we found our girl. And she was just perfect. She was just exactly what we were looking for.
It was really an adventure. It was really, even though it was science fiction, it was very much like the kind of David Lean epic movies that had been done years earlier.
Actually, it was quite interesting. We like found, you know, the perfect sand dunes in Yuma, Arizona.
The shoot in Arizona was actually a lot like going to Egypt at the height of summer or spring. The thermometer was literally getting over 120 degrees in the shade.
By the time we got to Yuma, people had been dropping on the set like flies. The boom operator went down, some of the cast members went down. I mean, it was intensely hot. And sand, you just couldn't get rid of it.
When we did Stargate, CG was in its infancy. So there is some CG in the movie, but for the most part, we had to do things real.
For the longest time, we tried to kind of figure out how we do this. Do we do this like totally Egyptian? But it had serious elements of Moroccan, you know, architecture, etc. And then the pyramids were like kind of totally Egyptian. And this is the first time I worked with Patrick Tatopoulos.
He explains to you what he wants. It's very clear, but he doesn't need you to play on a concept for like, you know, the next 10 years. He likes it, and we move forward.
One thing that consistently impressed me in the film was the enthusiasm that both Roland and Dean had for accuracy in the film.
It has to feel real. And it only can feel real when you do really good research and when you like kind of look at a lot of photographs of 1920s digging sites, you know, to find the right style.
We wanted to create a huge richness of finish and depth. So in the art department, there was tons of work done to create layers.
The entrance to the pyramid, we built. That was a 7-story tall set in the middle of the Yuma Desert. The interiors of the sets were so tall, we couldn't find any soundstage to put them in. We actually were the first to take the Spruce Goose hangar and convert it into a soundstage just because it was tall enough to put these incredibly tall sets.
I always thought sometimes you show the technology too much, and we talk with Roland about showing that the technology is actually behind the shell. So when you look at the pyramid is a very sleek object, and when the pyramid moves and changes, you start seeing the engine and the machines behind. But it's never in your face.
One of the problems when we wrote the script is when we referred to Anubis and Horus, we called them dog head and bird head. But anyone reading it thought, the bad guy has a bird head, the guy has a head of a dog, what's that gonna look like? So Patrick, he came up with this idea that these were helmets that would flip open, and he created these amazing designs. And when we had the mastage, for instance, that was a creature that had to be terrifying and lovable at the same time.
It's okay. It's okay.
He literally built this costume that we put on a Clydesdale horse, and we had the Clydesdale horse out in the middle of the desert. Then, of course, it had to run, and the Clydesdale couldn't run with that, so then he built a smaller version of the costume, and he put it on a dog, and we had the dog run in all the wide shots.
I was a little dog in a suit. And when you see it wide, it was like a little dog. So now it is like a dog in this heat, maybe 2 runs, that's it. It was a true science fiction fantasy, and everybody asked me, so do you believe in aliens? I said, no. It's just a good story, you know. Why should not a spaceship be a pyramid? Why should they not have symbols which the Egyptians then took and made their symbols?
Well, this was a passionate thing from my point of view. You have to understand, I'm a Trekkie. I'm a serious Trekkie. I really love Star Trek. And, Star Trek took the time to create the language of Klingon. So I thought, the science fiction fans who are very serious about their science fiction, I said, let's not just fake ancient Egyptian, let's really do it.
It's a curious word to use, eh, Keve? Yeah. Then adverbial, Sigimenev, sealed.
The language we spoke in the film was ancient Egyptian, and obviously it's not a language that's spoken anymore. So we had an Egyptologist on the set.
Actually, there were a lot of similarities between me and the Daniel Jackson character. Not the crazy pyramid ideas, but the idea of just finishing your PhD, your grants have run out, you don't know where you're going to get a job.
My understanding was that he was creating a language which will sound like what ancient Egyptian would probably sounded back then.
Baniwe!
Baniwe.
Baniwe!
Baniwe. Baniwe.
What's that mean?
I have no idea.
Now you gotta understand, I was getting phone calls from our executive producer, from our line producer saying, what are we spending all this money? There's not a single human in the world will know that this language is accurate. Why are we spending this money? And I just insisted on it. I just said the fans will appreciate it.
Give me my Aturuti.
We'd do a rehearsal with Roland, but he would set up the scene for us. And he'd just throw out things like, so maybe you can say something here. My thought was, Roland, what and how? Am I going to say something there? Because I'd have to go running to Stuart Smith.
You want to say you want to Get over here. Video.
One of the more challenging things for me was when the dialogue changed as they were going through just their rehearsal.
After 5 minutes of, going through this whole thing, he turned to me and said, there's no Egyptian word for that. I'd be like, okay, well, let's find a substitute, something along that line.
So I'd have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes to come up with a line. So I'd have to translate it into ancient Egyptian first. Then I had to figure out the pronunciation of it. Then I have to coach the actors real quick, and then we'd be into the scene.
It seems like writing is forbidden to them.
What the hieroglyphs are the consonants, and the vowels have been dropped for the sake of shorthand. And it was up to each Egyptologist's interpretation to put in the vowels where they thought it would go in.
What?
It's very plausible for the James Spader character to initially go, huh? But then suddenly be able to understand things.
Leggero?
Nate naturu.
Nate? Naturo.
Nafi.
The big thing to me was trying to make this sound like a real language, give it rhythms and patterns and all of those things that actually breathe life into a language.
Brew? He's inviting us to go with him.
How can you be so sure?
Because he's inviting us to go with him.
That was something that we, the actors, had to find. There'd be times I'd just look at Stuart and say, you gotta be kidding, man. I mean, you can't expect me to say that. There's a lot of mew-mews and you-yous. It sounds like I was calling a cat.
You-you! Afiti, you-you!
What?
And at one point we had Jay Davidson, who from England, had to learn all these lines, and he had a really tough time. So they gave him, like a little earpiece, which they like kind of hid.
Walter, he's ready for playback.
I'm ready for Stuart's earbud as soon as possible.
And at one point, Jay Davidson couldn't hear it, so he said,
Stuart, louder! And so we figured, this is not going to work, so we got to come up with something different. And so finally we came up with the idea of cue cards.
Actually, speaking of sign language, that was another thing that I got a lot from the hieroglyphs, were just some of the poses. Things like a bow or, the no, and went with that. It wasn't just the language, but it was also how you held your body.
Hey, Jackson, I don't think we should eat any food here.
I don't know, they might consider that an insult.
The first scene that I shot in the film was a scene where Kurt Russell, James Spader, and myself are eating some animal.
So you had to build something that looks a bit like a desert creature, obviously, so it's kind of like a reptile. And this was just good fun, just like design something ridiculous that people can eat.
I don't know what it was, but it looked revolting. And all credit to James, boy, because he just picked it up and popped it in his mouth.
It's a chicken. It's a chicken. It's good. Tastes.
Everything was against this movie. Nobody wanted to do it. The marketing people didn't understood the movie. And then at the end, it was like the sleeper hit of that year.
We'd done one film before, which was called Universal Soldier, and we just wanted to do better than that.
We went and saw it, and the theater was crowded. It was packed. It was a film unlike anything we'd seen before.
It just got to people. It's an action sci-fi adventure that has substance.
Usually on science fiction, you have travel by ships, and with Stargate, you just have a wormhole and a ring, and you step through it, and you're instantly across the galaxy to a new planet.
My favorite moments in the movies I've been involved in were never written. They happen. The walking through the Stargate scene, I wrote in that script with Roland simply, the team walks through the Stargate. So now we go to do it, and Roland's staging it, and he has the first guy go through, and the next guy go through, and all of a sudden, James Spader walks up to the Stargate, and he stops, and he looks at it. And it's this amazing moment. And it just happened with a really good actor and a director willing to let the actor experiment on the set. And that's my favorite part of the whole movie. And that is the moment that starts the entire Stargate franchise.
The movie defined Stargate. It's where everything is launched from.
Dean and I, we got offered the TV show first. And we were kind of busy with other stuff.
Cut. Well, the series is a mixed bag. I mean, it's a little bit like if somebody else raised your child. You're still really proud of your child, but it breaks your heart that you're not the one who got to raise them. Now there are Stargate conventions. I think if you had asked me then if I thought there would ever be a Stargate convention, I probably would have cracked up laughing.
How you doing?
I think the fans have the same level of enthusiasm for Stargate as they do any science fiction. I don't see any end for the Stargate franchise. It's really just getting started, and the enthusiasm from the fans and the people that I've met and that I talk to, they love it, and I think it's going to have a life of its own and live for a long, long time.
The funny about the fans is very often they know the story more than you do, they know details more than you do, and they're amazing.
The fans themselves tend to humanize the whole experience. I thought, is it going to be a bunch of crazy people? And they're not. The biggest question I get is, what does Bunny Way mean? Which is sweet, very sweet.
A lot of fans collect a lot of memorabilia from the film. Most screen-used memorabilia is very expensive. I've been lucky enough where I've come across people, buying and selling different props from the film.
Well, you can tell that's because of your design that things become collectible. They become collectible because of the impact the movie had on the audience and because they become cult movie or something.
What I have here is it's a scarab beetle. It's the winged beetle. You see that a lot in Egyptian mythology, and you see it throughout the production of Stargate and the artwork that Patrick Totopoulos did. Supposedly was the inspiration for the glider.
When the movie first came out, it was a movie that really just science fiction fans liked, and everyone else thought was, a summer popcorn movie.
I got an idea.
Now, I see reviewers talking about other movies and saying, but it's not as good as Stargate.
I love the fact that it took a portion of our history and said, this could have happened. This could have been how your culture started.
It really gives people, I think, an appreciation for Egypt, and it's just a fascinating adventure. It was an amazing experience.
Part of the success of this movie, you look up on that screen and you can see everyone is just relishing every moment.
For a lot of people, this was a significant film because it ended up being incredibly successful and made a great jump for Roland Emmerich.
Stargate has for me a special meaning, very hard to make, a big success, and a lot of people still today come up to me and said, we love Stargate.
I'll be seeing you around.